The long-awaited day had finally arrived. Kamsi stood in front of Miss Temi's gate, taking in every detail with wide eyes. At last, she was going to see the mansion her mother, Oluchi, had spoken about so many times. Calm, her mother would often call her during their conversations. Do you know that the mansion has 5 living rooms? Each one is uniquely designed. Now, standing there, Kamsi could hardly believe it. Her mother had never been allowed visitors, so this was her first glimpse of the place. She reached out, wanting to feel the intricate details on the gate, but Oluchi quickly grabbed her hand. Kamsi, I know you are excited we are moving in, but you have to be sensitive. Remember, Miss Temi is in mourning, Oluchi said firmly. Miss Temi had lost her daughter, her only child, in a car crash, and since then she had been a shadow of herself. All her life, she worked hard to ensure her daughter, Jade, had a good life, and now she was no more. Just like Oluchi, they were both single mothers who had successfully raised their children without the help of a husband, and it was these facts that made Temi admire Oluchi. On top of that, Oluchi was trustworthy and hardworking, so she easily found her way into Temi's heart. So when Jade passed away, she was the only one amongst the household staff who Temi would even let her come close to or even speak to her. One of the nights when Temi woke up really sad, she wanted to speak to just one person, Oluchi. But Oluchi was not a living staff like some of the others. So the next morning, when Oluchi resumed her duty, Temi said to her, "Please move in with me. I need a friend. I need you." All her life, Temi had never really made close friends. Her business and Jade were her everything. Oluchi was sympathetic when she heard Temi's offer. She too had considered how much of a difference it would make if she was living with Temi, but she could not leave her daughter alone at home. "Temi, I would love to, but you know I have a teenage daughter. I can't leave her by herself," Oluchi responded. "My friend," Temi said, holding Oluchi's hands, "I have many rooms in this house. Your daughter is welcome to stay in any of them. I just want you to be here with me." Oluchi was touched that Temi was willing to flaunt her long-standing no visitors policy just to accommodate her and Kamsi. After a brief moment of hesitation, she agreed. Now, Temi had settled Oluchi and Kamsi into their separate rooms after a very warm welcome. She would not even let them stay in the staff quarters or share a room. They were going to live with her on the same floor where her room was situated. Kamsi could not believe her new life. She ran around her new room when she was finally alone. It was so spacious. The room was bigger than the entire self-contained apartment where she and her mother lived. Her luxurious new room was a blend of elegance and comfort. At the center was a king-sized bed draped with a plush velvet duvet in deep emerald green. A crystal chandelier hung overhead. On one side of the room, double doors opened into a spacious walk-in wardrobe with rows of shelves, hanging racks and drawers. The ensuite bathroom featured a marble countertop, a large bathtub, and a rainfall shower with gold accents adding a touch of opulence. Gosh, she jokingly fainted while imagining whether to sleep in the bedroom, closet, or bathroom. Yet, despite her bubbling excitement, Kamsi kept her mother's warning in mind about being sensitive to Miss Temi's grief. So over the next few weeks, she walked around with caution, minding her business and speaking only when spoken to. But one afternoon, there was a knock on Kamsi's door. To her surprise, it was her mother, but she was not alone. Miss Temi stood beside her. Kamsi became nervous, wondering why her mother had come to see her with Miss Temi. "Good evening," Kamsi greeted them, her voice a little shaky. Her mother smiled, sitting down next to her, while Miss Temi took a seat in a nearby chair. "Kamsi," her mother began, "Miss Temi has something important to tell you. But before she does, I want you to know that you are free to decline her offer. We are not forcing you into anything." Kamsi nodded, her curiosity growing as she turned to Miss Temi. "I'd like to sponsor the rest of your education," Miss Temi said gently. "But I would also like you to attend the school my late daughter went to. It's a prestigious college that will prepare you for studying abroad when the time comes," Temi said. Kamsi's eyes widened in shock. First, Miss Temi had opened her home to them, and now she was offering to pay for her education. She glanced at her mother, expecting her to be as excited as she was, but instead, Oluchi looked concerned. "What's wrong, Mom?" she asked, and Oluchi softly sighed. "It's a boarding school for rich girls. Will they accept my Kamsi? I'm just worried you will struggle to fit in," she responded. But Temi immediately cautioned her. "You cannot think like that. She's got the potential to go far, and this school will give her the opportunities she deserves. Do not let fear hold her back." Kamsi sat quietly, taking in every word. Her heart was racing. A prestigious school, studying abroad, it all sounded like a dream. But she also felt the weight of her mother's concerns. What if the other girls did not accept her? What if she did not fit in? "It's your decision, Kam. Whatever you choose, I will support you," her mother said, squeezing her arms. Kamsi felt a lump in her throat. The thought of leaving her mother and adjusting to a new world frightened her. But something deep inside her knew this could be the break she had always hoped for. It could be a stepping stone to providing the life she wanted for herself and her mother in the future. So boldly, she turned to Miss Temi, her voice steady with determination. "Thank you, Ma. I'll go to that school and I'll make sure I succeed." Oluchi immediately asked, still looking worried, "Are you sure, Kamsi?" But Kamsi nodded. "Yes, Mom. I'll make you proud." Miss Temi smiled, relief washing over her face. "You already have, Kamsi. I'll make the arrangements." At that moment, Kamsi knew her life was about to take a new, exciting turn. Weeks had passed, and the time had finally come for Kamsi to start at Pacific Halls, the prestigious boarding school for girls. As she sat in the principal's office with her mother and Miss Temi, it all still felt surreal. She thought she might miss the luxury of Miss Temi's home, but now, seeing Pacific Halls, she wasn't so sure. The school was no ordinary place. If you did not know better, you would think it was a five-star hotel. Kamsi absent-mindedly ran her hands over her new school skirt, amazed by the fine fabric. It was a far cry from the thin material of her old skirt, which always required her to wear black tights underneath. After a few moments, her mother and Miss Temi said their goodbyes, leaving her alone with the principal. "Calm, please, be good. Do not waste this opportunity," her mother said, hugging her tightly before getting into the car. As the car disappeared from view, Kamsi turned to follow the principal, only to realize she was standing there alone. Confused, she made her way back to the office, surprised that the principal had left her behind. "Ma'am, I did not realize you had gone back to your office," Kamsi said politely. The principal glanced up from her computer rolling her eyes. Were you expecting me to wait for you? She snapped. Kamsi was taken aback. Not long ago, the principal had been sweet in front of her mother and Miss Temi, assuring her that she would love her time at Pacific Halls. I'm sorry, Kamsi apologized quickly. Who will show me to my dorm? She asked hesitantly. The principal raised an eyebrow. Dorm? She repeated slowly, as if tasting the word. Ah, I see. You're new here. We prefer to use the full term, dormitory. You will need to adjust to our standards. The woman finally stood up and asked Kamsi to follow her. She would not even offer or call someone to help Kamsi carry her luggage. Struggling under the weight of her luggage, Kamsi did not let the principal's rudeness bother her. She was just excited to be there. When they reached her room, Kamsi's face lit up. It was beautiful, with 2 beds neatly arranged. One bed was clearly taken and the principal pointed to the empty one. It's so pretty, Kamsi exclaimed. I thought I'll be in a room with bunk beds. The principal sighed, rolling her eyes again. Everyone is in class right now. Unpack your things and make sure you don't steal anything or you'll be expelled, she said coldly. Still, Kamsi was not fazed by her attitude. She smiled and nodded, which only seemed to irritate the principal more. Poor kids, always reaping where they did not sow. The woman muttered angrily before storming out and slamming the door behind her. Kamsi sat on the bed, her smile fading as her earlier excitement began to waver. She put on a brave face, but her mother's warning echoed in her mind. For a moment, doubt crept in, but she quickly pushed it away. I can't wait to meet my new roommate, she whispered to herself, trying to focus on unpacking the exciting new things Miss Temi had bought for her. Several hours later, Kamsi fell asleep after she was done unpacking, and when she finally woke up, she saw a girl sitting on the other bed staring at her. Hi, Kamsi said excitedly as she rubbed her eyes. You must be my roommate, she added, but the girl stared at her more intensely. Hello, Kamsi repeated again. The girl quietly stood up, ignoring Kamsi. She began arranging her books, and eventually, when the matron announced it was time for dinner, the girl stormed out of the room and banged the door. Kamsi remained in the room. Although she was very hungry, she was too afraid to leave, not knowing what else to expect. However, she decided she would still try to speak to her roommate when she returned. Eventually, the girl did, but she still wouldn't say a word to her. However, Kamsi noticed the girl staring at her often, as if she was searching for something on her face. Nonye, Kamsi spoke carefully. Can you please tell me what's wrong? But Nonye angrily responded. He told you my name too. I am sure you know everything about my family. But Kamsi quickly pointed to a picture frame on the shelf near Nonye's bed that had her name written on it. Nonye, slightly embarrassed, muttered, Mind your business. Then more sharply she added, The problem is you. You need to leave my school. Kamsi's heart sank. What did she even mean by, he told you my name too? She began to wonder if she would ever catch a break in Pacific Halls. She had been excited to meet her roommate, but this was not the warm welcome she expected. That night, she forced herself to sleep, hoping for a better tomorrow. However, the following day, Kamsi soon realized she was not exactly welcomed by the other girls in school. As she walked into the dining hall to get her breakfast, she noticed how people stared at her, and when she picked her tray of food, she found her way to a small group of girls sitting on a table and decided to join them. But immediately she sat down, they stood up and walked away. Kamsi felt like the ground would open and swallow her. She heard some girls giggle in the background. That's the charity girl that Jade's mom is taking care of. She heard someone behind her say. Embarrassed, she quickly abandoned her meal and left for class. Days went by and Kamsi still could not find acceptance amongst the girls. Even when she managed to sit with some of them during group projects, she found it hard to fit in because they would purposely begin to talk about luxurious and expensive things she had no clue of. However, there was a particular girl named Tiwa who had sworn to make Kamsi's life miserable for no particular reason. She was quite popular in school and she spearheaded the bullying attacks on Kamsi. She influenced the other girls to call her wannabe Jade, and unfortunately, they were in the same class. When Kamsi tried to do something exceptional or use an item, perhaps the brand new laptop Miss Temi bought for her, Tiwa would say, "Look at you, pretending you belong here just because Jade's mom felt sorry for you." Tiwa's words were followed by laughter from everyone around her, making Kamsi feel small. Tiwa did not stop there. Sometimes she would mock Kamsi's accent whenever she spoke. "Ew, why do you sound so local?" she would ask with a disgusted look. She tried everything to hurt Kamsi's feelings, but the worst was the day she emptied an entire trash can on her. "Oops, I thought it was the general waste bin," Tiwa said with a fake smile as the trash tumbled onto Kamsi's shoes and uniform. Every night, Kamsi cried herself to sleep. What made it even worse was her roommate, who would not speak to her, but spent her time staring at her when she thought she was not looking. One evening, during dinner, Kamsi walked into the dining hall as usual, expecting to eat her meal alone. She spotted Tiwa and a group of girls sitting at their table. Without much thought, she headed to her usual table, only to notice the girls rushing over to sit there, clearly trying to mock her. Disheartened, Kamsi turned to leave, deciding to snack on her provisions back in her room instead. But just as she reached the door, she heard someone call out, "Kamsi, come sit with us." Kamsi turned around, surprised to see Nonye calling her over. Still in shock, she slowly approached Nonye, who was sitting with another girl. The girl smiled politely at Kamsi, but excused herself as soon as she sat down. "Is she leaving because of me?" Kamsi asked, a bit shy. Nonye shook her head. "No, she's got a math test tomorrow." Kamsi smiled slightly. "Thank you for letting me sit here." Nonye chuckled. "It's a public space. No need to thank me." Then she paused, her expression growing more serious. "Besides, you're my sister. I can't just watch them treat you like that." Kamsi froze, unsure of how to respond. Nonye always spoke strangely, but Kamsi never really understood her. Nonye did not explain further, so they both ate in silence. When they finished and headed back to their rooms, the quiet continued, until Nonye suddenly spoke up again. "I'm sure you learned this attitude from my dad. Always silent, unbothered about how the next person feels." Kamsi sighed, obviously tired. "Nonye, I really don't know what you're talking about. I've never met your dad. Jade's mom offered me a scholarship to Pacific Halls. I'm just here to study." Nonye studied her for a moment before rushing over to her suitcase. She pulled out a photo album, opened it and placed it on Kamsi's lap. "Are you telling me you don't know him?" Nonye pointed to a picture of her father. Kamsi's eyes widened. The man in the photo looked just like her, the resemblance undeniable. "I do not know him, but we obviously look alike," Kamsi slowly said. Nonye, realizing Kamsi might be telling the truth, took the album and tucked it into her box, and as usual, left the room, leaving Kamsi confused. A week passed, and despite the tension, Kamsi and Nonye began to talk more. Small conversations, shared smiles in the hallways, and sitting together in the cafeteria. The beginnings of a friendship started to form. Kamsi was curious about the man in the album, but she decided not to ask Nonye about him. It was clear Nonye did not want to talk, and Kamsi did not want to jeopardize the fragile bond they were building. But Kamsi was sure of one thing: the man in the picture was her father. One evening, Nonye came into the room crying. Without hesitation, Kamsi rushed to her side, wrapping her arms around her. Nonye collapsed into Kamsi's embrace, sobbing on her shoulder. "My parents are finally getting a divorce," Nonye cried, her voice breaking as the tears streamed down her face. Kamsi wrapped her arms around her, offering silent comfort. Nonye, her guard down, began to open up about her family. She spoke of her father's numerous cheating scandals and how her mother had endured it all. "I don't blame my mother. I'm proud of her. It just hurts that my parents won't be together anymore," Nonye added, then paused before sitting up and glaring at Kamsi. "Your mother can have him now. I guess she and Jade's mom planned to bring you here all along," she said, her voice filled with annoyance. Kamsi's heart tightened with anger. She wasn't about to let anyone insult her mother or Miss Temi. "That's enough, Nonye," Kamsi snapped. "I'm sorry for what's happening with your parents, but do not cross the line. You will not speak about my mom or Miss Temi like that." She stepped away from Nonye, retreating to her side of the room. For a moment, silence hung between them, but Nonye quickly followed, wrapping her arms around Kamsi. "I'm sorry, Kamsi. I shouldn't have said that," Nonye apologized, her voice small and regretful. Kamsi softened slightly, but kept her stance firm. "That's okay," she replied. "But don't ever say something like that again." They sat down again, the tension melting away. Suddenly, Nonye burst into laughter. "I did not know you had so much fire in you. You're definitely an Okafor," she teased, using her father's last name. But Kamsi did not care about the name. "To be honest, Nonye, I have no interest in meeting your father, and I'm sure my mom doesn't either. So you can relax," Kamsi said calmly. She explained that her mother had never spoken about her father and how sad she seemed when Kamsi had asked about him once. It had been enough to make Kamsi never bring it up again. "I won't bring this up to my mom," Kamsi assured her. "You have my word. Besides, I don't want to make things worse between your parents." But Nonye had already moved past the conversation. She was already smiling. All she wanted was to be friends with Kamsi. She apologized again for the hard time she had given her and asked for a second chance. Kamsi accepted, and the two girls hugged it out. From that day forward, Kamsi and Nonye were almost inseparable. They spent their free time learning more about each other, their bond growing stronger. Other girls in the school began warming up to Kamsi too, since Nonye was quite popular. Tiwa, however, remained mean, continuing to bully Kamsi whenever she was alone. But Kamsi never retaliated. She was there to study, and that was all that mattered to her. Weeks passed, and it was time for the girls of Pacific Halls to head home for the holidays. As Kamsi and Nonye packed their luggage, the matron came by to inform Nonye that her father had arrived to pick her up. Nonye was shocked. Her father had never come to her school before. She knew it had to do with the divorce. She looked over at Kamsi, whose heart raced at the news. The thought of being in the same space as her estranged father terrified her. "Are you sure you don't want to meet him?" Nonye asked gently. "He's been a terrible husband to my mom, but he has not been so bad to me." Kamsi shook her head firmly. "No, I don't want to meet him. I'm content with my life. Nonye, my mother is enough for me," she responded confidently. Nonye raised an eyebrow, coughing lightly. "Only your mother?" she asked, with a touch of sarcasm. Kamsi smiled and corrected herself. My mother and my sister are enough for me. The two girls hugged, and soon after, Nonye left to meet her dad outside. About an hour later, the matron came by again, announcing that Oluchi had arrived to pick Kamsi up. Excitement surged through her, and she hurried out of the room to meet her mother. But when she reached the waiting room, Kamsi froze in shock. Standing there was her mother Oluchi, beside the man from the picture, Nonye's father, and Nonye herself. Her instinct was to turn back, but her hurried entrance had already drawn their attention. Her mother waved at her, and with a forced smile, Kamsi walked over to them. Come, Oluchi began, pulling her into a hug. Say hello to your uncle, the man interjected, cutting Oluchi off. Kamsi began to boil. Ridiculous. Was he really about to deny being her father? They looked so much alike, it was undeniable. The resemblance was almost like looking into a mirror. She wanted to pull her mother away from that humiliating scene, but as she reached for her hand, she heard Nonye scream. Uncle Chuka! Nonye yelled, running toward someone else. Kamsi turned, her confusion deepening. There stood another man, identical to the one beside her mother. It was clear that the two men were identical twins. Kamsi watched in disbelief as Chuka, though embracing Nonye, kept his gaze locked on Oluchi. Oluchi, too, could hardly keep her own gaze away from Chuka. It was as if they were both seeing ghosts. Cheta, Nonye's father, quickly ushered the girls away to give Chuka and Oluchi space to talk. I wanted to come back to the room to call you, Nonye started, explaining to Kamsi as they walked. On our way out, your mom ran into us, but she called my dad by his twin's name, Chuka. Kamsi's eyes widened as Nonye continued. My dad, Cheta, quickly corrected her that she had the wrong twin. That's when it clicked for me. If my father did not know your mom, then you're obviously Uncle Chuka's daughter. So I told my dad, and he went back to speak to your mom. Kamsi shook her head, still not wanting to accept what was unfolding. Nonye, I told you, I'm content with my mother and sister. Besides, your uncle probably has a family of his own. My mother and I would not want to complicate his life. Kamsi, I get it, Nonye said gently. But Uncle Chuka is a wonderful man, and you deserve a father like him. It never crossed my mind that he could be your father, because my dad is the one with many cheating scandals. Uncle Chuka is always focused on his many businesses, and for your information, he has never been married. The two girls sat together in silence, holding hands as they waited. Time seemed to stretch on forever, until finally, Chuka and Oluchi returned from their conversation. Hello, beautiful, Chuka said, his eyes warm as he smiled at Kamsi. She looked to her mother for approval, and Oluchi gave a reassuring nod. Good afternoon, Kamsi greeted him, her voice polite but cautious. Chuka asked about her academics, and she answered politely, occasionally glancing at her mother for guidance. Just as their conversation began to ease, they were interrupted by Tiwa and her father, Bamidele. Wonderful to see you here, Chuka, Bamidele greeted enthusiastically, shaking his hand. Chuka smiled and introduced everyone to Bamidele. And that's my daughter, he said proudly, pointing to Kamsi. Bamidele smiled at her. Say thank you to your daddy for me. He helped keep my business afloat. Your daddy is my #1 client. They all laughed, except for Tiwa, who was melting in shame. It was clear that she could no longer bully Kamsi, now that Kamsi's father was financially important to her dad. Eventually, Everyone went their separate ways, heading home. Later, Oluchi sat Kamsi down and explained everything. I met your dad during one of his business trips, Oluchi began. But when he briefly returned home, a riot broke out in my area. The local boys were not happy with the project. They set houses on fire. It was so dangerous, Cam. I had to flee for my life. I lost my phone, my belongings. I could not find a way to contact your father. So, he did not abandon you? Kamsi asked softly. Oluchi shook her head fiercely. No, Cam. Your father is a good man. He said he went back to search for me, but I was nowhere to be found. I tried to find him when I realized I was pregnant, but I couldn't. And after a while, I stopped looking or talking about him because I chose to focus on you. Kamsi hesitated before asking, So, are you going to marry him now? Cam, you're being too direct, Oluchi exclaimed, startled by the blunt question. What, Mom? I saw the way you two looked at each other, and you're even blushing now. Kamsi teased, a smile creeping across her face. Oluchi could not help but laugh. Cam, I don't know about that. I guess time will tell. And time certainly did tell. Chuka began visiting Miss Temi's house often, taking Oluchi out on dates and making every effort to make up for the time he had missed in Kamsi's life. Kamsi, though cautious at first, eventually opened her heart to him. Nonye also became a regular visitor, often spending nights at Kamsi's home. The two girls were closer than ever. Guess who's going to be the new it girl when school resumes? Nonye said one afternoon during one of their many hangouts. But Kamsi was clueless. It's you, Kamsi, Nonye squealed. You don't even realize how much Uncle Chuka is worth. Your dad is easily the richest parent at Pacific Halls. Kamsi shook her head, laughing. Nonye, I don't care. I'm only there to study. Nonye finished for her, laughing. We know you are there to study. But aren't you at least a little excited that your life is getting more exciting? Kamsi finally let herself smile. I won't lie, I'm so excited, she squealed, and the two girls hugged each other tightly. Indeed, life was about to change in ways Kamsi had never imagined. Her mother would likely marry her father, bringing their family together at last. She had a loving auntie in Miss Temi, and her former troublesome roommate had become a true sister. With an exciting future ahead and endless possibilities, Kamsi felt ready to embrace all that she could become. Jeremiah 29 verse 11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and the future. Kamsi's journey is one of unexpected blessings and opportunities. Despite her challenges and fears, everything works out in a way that brings her closer to her family and provides a bright, promising future. From my experience, I've learned to lean on God during tough times because He cares deeply, and in the perfect time, He always comes through in ways that exceed my expectations. I love to trust in God because I'm always amazed by how He works things out, and I know that eye has not seen, nor ear heard, nor have entered into the heart of man the things which God has prepared for those who love Him. Thank you for watching this story today. If you enjoyed it, please like and share with your loved ones. Until next time, take care and goodbye.